you scanned the internet looking for chicks with pierced nipples, and you slipped a couple clicks and went and found the talking cripple. His concept is to share with you his many thoughts, and it's clear-headed cause he never drank a beer or hit the pot. So if you have an open mind and a willingness to learn, stay tuned to this page and just see what you may learn. Now grab yourself a snack, kick back and enjoy the unique views of life brought to you by crippieboy.
Originally, I'd intended to make this video about reforms needed in all these programs, as the current talking point in the political realm is that entitlements are bankrupting America, which is only partially true. However, I felt that more people need to be educated on what the programs are before you start talking about ideas on how to reform them. There have been numerous reforms done in the past, some better, some worse. Like I said, I'm just going to give you an introduction to these programs today. In future videos, I will discuss what I feel are the important changes needed to these programs for the future, for both fiscal soundness and for the benefit of the American citizens. The Social Security Act was originally signed in 1935 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt as part of the New Deal. When the country was going through the Great Depression, people were worried, scared, much like today, where unemployment rates are high. Today's unemployment rates and poverty levels are tiny compared to what they were back in the 30s. Things are much better than they were back then, and in part because of the Social Security Act. There's two major amendments that I want to discuss. There's been numerous ones over the years. The two big ones to me are 1965, when Medicare and Medicaid were added, and in 1983, when the Social Security Trust Fund was moved to a quote off-budget status. This allowed the U.S. government, to borrow against surpluses in the Social Security Trust Fund, which is why you'll hear different numbers on national debt. Current national debt is $9 trillion, but the gross national debt is $14 trillion, because that includes borrowing done within government programs. Treasury bonds written on money that's been taken out of the Social Security Trust Fund is one of the primary ways they've got that money. So the programs aren't as broke as they're made out to sound. Had they not taken this money for other uses, the money would be there to sustain these programs for years to come. That's just one of the things that I'll discuss later about what I think is needed in reform. A lot of people think about Social Security and they think about retirement. They think about old folks. They get their Social Security check, and the third every month they're hitting the stores because Social Security check showed up. That's one of the main areas. Just to back up a little bit, under the Social Security Act, numerous programs fall. Some of the programs include federal old age retirement, survivors and disability insurance, supplemental security income, temporary assistance for needy families, also known as TANF, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP programs for kids, that children's health insurance. So it's not just a monthly check. It's also medical programs fall under the Social Security Act. These are also often brought up as the entitlement programs that need to be reformed, so it makes sense to all go together. The retirement is a Title II benefit, Title II of the Social Security Act. I mention that because it ties it in with other programs later on. You have to be 62 minimum to go on the retirement. The amount of your monthly check is based on how much you've contributed, how many quarters you've contributed. I don't know the details of the calculation. You can pull it up online, but it's based on how much and how many quarters you've contributed. They have tried to make Social Security last longer by moving the retirement age up. If you were born after 1960, you can't get your full retirement until you're 67 years old. So they are making us work longer to get our retirement. The next program I'll talk about is SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. Again, this falls under Title II of the Social Security Act. You have to have a qualifying disability. There's a procedure Social Security goes through to determine if you meet their their disability standards. One of the big things is that you cannot perform SGA, substantial gainful activity. Basically, as the law sits today, you can't work. And there's programs to help you go back to work. But in order to qualify, you have to not be qualified to do, in order to qualify for Social Security, you can't be able to do any job. And as far as I'm concerned, if you can blink your eyes, there's a job out there for you in today's world. Maybe not in today's economy, but with the technology that exists, there's something you could do that would pay you money. But for Social Security standards, you can't perform SGA. You'll see that over and over again. You have to have a condition that's expected to last at least 12 months or result in death. You must be under 65, as you would meet the retirement guidelines otherwise. The amount, much like retirement, the amount you receive in a check is based on earnings in recent quarters, the number of quarters. It varies on how old you are. If you're 20 years old, you're not expected to have worked as many quarters as if you were 60 years old, let's say. After 24 months of being on SSDI, you become automatically eligible for Medicare. When you go on retirement, Social Security, you're immediately eligible for Medicare. So if you go on SSDI, you have a disability. Most people with disabilities have high medical costs, but you basically have no insurance for 2 years. It's a big gap a lot of people fall into. The next program I'm talking about is SSI, Supplemental Security Income. SSI and SSDI on the surface kind of seem the same, but they're actually very different. As I said, SSDI is a Title II program. SSI is a Title 16 program. SSDI, retirement, and most of the other Medicare programs are funded out of the Social Security Trust Fund, where SSI is funded from the U.S. Treasury's general funds. It was created in 1974 to replace similar programs that varied state by state. Currently covers 8 million Americans. You have to be 65, blind, or disabled. And it's a means-tested program, meaning that you have to meet income and asset limits. The current asset limits are $2,000 a person, $3,000 per couple, other than you're allowed one house and one car. So one house, one car, $2,000 in assets. Good luck ever getting off the system if that's all you have. I'm trying not to give my opinion. I apologize. Later I'll talk about that in future videos. In 1980, I believe it was 84, they decided, okay, we need to up these levels. They were too low. So between 84 and 89, they slowly ramped them up. It may have been a little later, maybe like 86 to 89. But they ramped them up to the levels they're at today, $2,000 a person, $3,000 a couple. If you take a little look around the web, you'll quickly realize average wages have doubled in that time. Inflation has doubled. So in other words, $2,000 today is worth $1,000 in 1989. So those levels are very low. The benefit levels, the amount you get in a check, is based off of poverty levels. I'll spare you the calculations, but in 2011, if you're single, you get $674. If you're a couple, you get $1,011. There are some people who get less than that for various reasons. A lot of people end up owing Social Security money because Social Security overpays them. So instead of getting your $674, you get $500 and they expect you to live on it. I'm trying not to give my opinion. I apologize again. If you're eligible for SSI, you're automatically eligible for Medicaid under federal law. So unlike SSDI, if you're poor and you haven't worked enough to get SSDI, then when you get SSI, you automatically get your health insurance through Medicaid, and then you can get on Medicare later if you're dual eligible SSI and SSDI. You can end up on Medicaid, or on Medicare, I apologize. Where if you're on SSDI, initially you're waiting 2 years to get eligible for Medicare. Speaking of Medicare, it was established under the Social Security Act of 1965. If you are 65 or older, you get Medicare under the retirement package. And if you receive SSDI after 24 months, you will also be eligible for Medicare. As of 2008, 45 million Americans were enrolled in Medicare programs. There's 4 parts to Medicare. Part A is hospital coverage, Part B is medical, Part D is drug coverage, prescription drug coverage. This was recently added. Used to be Medicare didn't cover much in prescription drugs. Part C is a way of getting Medicare services through what are known as Medicare Advantage plans through private health insurance companies. And they must meet the standards of Medicare services. They can drop a little bit in one area and increase in another, but that's all determined by what is known as CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Standards. I don't know why there's only one S when there's Medicare and Medicaid, but it's the government. Medigap coverage is something that 18% of people on Medicare utilize to make up for the things Medicare doesn't cover. This is, again, a program through private health insurance companies, and CMS sets the standards for what they must include or have in their programs. Some states have additional items that have to be in those private supplemental insurances. Medicaid was also established in 1965, Social Security Act. It is funded by a combination of state and federal dollars, where Medicare is 100% federal money. Medicaid is as much as 50% state funded. They get grants from the federal government, and then the state makes up the rest, up to 50%. Again, CMS sets the guidelines, and then the states have to write their policies within those guidelines. So state to state, Medicaid coverage does vary. However, they all must meet these federal guidelines. Some states use some alternate names. Medi-Cal in California, Sooner Care in Oklahoma. There's TennCare. There's some various ones around the country, but they're all Medicaid at the end of the day. They must meet those CMS guidelines. Very much like SSI, which automatically qualifies you for Medicaid. Medicaid is a means-tested, needs-based program. You have to meet income and asset limits. They're usually very similar to the SSI limits. And you must prove a need, have a disability, have underage children. Just being poor doesn't mean you get Medicaid. The coverage under Medicaid is much broader than Medicare. In my personal case, I have both Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare covers a lot of my doctor bills, my hospital bills. Medicaid covers my home health care, and that's a very high expense for me. I live at home. I'm not tied up in a nursing home. I get home health care services twice a day. Medicare doesn't cover those. Only Medicaid does. As of 2001, 6.5 million people were like myself. They had both Medicare and Medicaid. Of the 45 million people on Medicare, 6.5 also have Medicaid. There's also a lot of people who have Medicaid who don't have Medicare. Back in the early 90s, 1990, there was a law signed in that allowed states to charge copays. So now some states have administered copays for various services. From what I understand, none of them are very high, but that helps the state not spend quite as much. And in 1993, the Medicaid Estate Recovery Act was signed into law, and that requires states to sue your estate upon your death. This had always been allowed, now it's required. It's a way that Medicaid can get back money for your care. They can only sue for the amount of care they paid for, but after you die, they can sue and get your money. If you own a nursing home, they can take your money. Lawyers have found ways around these using different trust plans and different provisions. I don't know all the details in those laws, but there are ways around this, and a lot of seniors especially have worked their way around this. So those are just a few of the basics of the Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security provisions. I'm not going to get into unemployment and the other programs. I hope you'll join me for future videos on what I feel are the important changes that are needed to these programs. I believe the next step in people with disabilities evolution is to go back to work, and as written, the laws don't allow for that very easily. It's a big gap to jump. So I have my own thoughts on how to improve that, and I hope you'll all listen later. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate those who subscribe. Send me your thoughts. You can email me, or you can post some comments on the videos. And as always, check us out at crippieboy.com, and don't forget to check out my company, crippleconcepts.com. Thanks for watching.